Mads-Peter gave a great lecture about machine learning and Gaussian processes. But I found talking to him to be particularly interesting, and I show here the interview that he did. You might think I've been forced into it because my sound recording equipment didn't capture the lecture well. But that would not be true. I'm pleased it turned out this way. Tell me how you got into machine learning.
Well, I've been interested in programming for a long time. So I started programming in between high school and my starting university because I had read somewhere that this would be a nice skill to have if you wanted to be a physicist. And I really enjoyed it, and I kept doing it, and then I found a PhD position that involved a lot of programming and tinkering with computer code. And sort of by accident, that was also computer code for machine learning, and then I got a taste for that and have been exploring different aspects of that since.
Is machine learning important?
Traditionally, we make some prediction. I guess Einstein created general or special relativity before observing some of the phenomenon, and then like made predictions saying, well, my theory predicts this, and it worked out. And now we have, for example, in quantum mechanics, there's a whole range of things that can be calculated, but they're extremely difficult and expensive to calculate, requiring supercomputer usage, burning a lot of electricity in the process. And machine learning offers a way of making more predictions that are perhaps they're not exactly as accurate as would have gotten out of actually calculating the physics, but you can calculate many more examples, explore much more of the sort of the parameter space of your problem by having a cheap machine learning model that approximates the complicated physics well enough that it's useful.
Is the saving significant?
Now you save, I mean, in my field of material science, where we do a lot of so-called density functional calculations that are to calculate the energy of a atomistic configuration, you can save on the orders of like 3 orders of magnitude or 2 orders of magnitude in computational time. So what could take an hour can take on the order of a second. I think it will be really important in many fields. I think my opinion on whether it's a tool or a new sort of pillar or part of the scientific method depends on a bit day to day, but it's definitely going to keep progressing and keep being important and have influence in many aspects where there's data but not an easy way to model the data. And give opportunities again to make both computational and theoretical and experimental studies more efficient by having access to models that are quite accurate but very cheap compared to the traditional way of calculating the physics out.
By cheap, you're meaning computer time and electricity use?
Computer time, the electricity, I mean, hopefully also in experimental time, by doing the right experiments, because it has been guided, the choice of what the parameters of the experiments are have been guided by computational studies that have used machine learning or a machine learning model based on previous experiments that tells you the regions of the experimental space that are interesting to explore.
Do you come across many scientists who are reluctant to use this technique?
No, but perhaps that's more about my my circle of people I meet rather than the general.
What would you say if you were talking to such a reluctant physicist?
I would say they should try it and see if it works for their domain, and like in the end it's just math, and we rely on math for everything else in physics anyway. So if you're finding it a bit unpleasant, then try to look at the math and see that it is grounded in something. We like to call it a black box, but a lot of it has a lot of thought put into it, and it's not just a random um, thing coming out of the computer. There is guiding principles, and there is a structure in how it's done, and there is what should you call it? Valid. The results that come out are fairly valid, and often you can even get an idea of the uncertainty or the confidence of your models along with their prediction.
I said I'm an old-fashioned physicist, and I am. And I need to ask what might be a ridiculous question. If you have Newton's laws of motion, you can use them to predict how to get a space capsule from the Earth to the Moon. But with machine learning, it seems to me, you don't need Newton's laws anymore. You could measure the flight of cricket balls being thrown, and footballs, and bullets, and all sorts of dynamic things, and collect huge amounts of data. And from that data, with machine learning, you could predict how to get a spaceship from Earth to a particular spot on the Moon. And does that mean that Newton's laws are now unimportant, that we don't need them anymore?
I would go out on a limb and guess that, yeah, it would work. I think it could work. Again, I think a lot of thought would have to be put into how to do it. But I don't think that means that Newton's laws are not important. I think we still want to be able to condense things into sort of a theoretical description that captures the whole thing when that is possible. But I think a lot of the data that we see nowadays is just much more difficult to describe than what can be described with Newton's laws. And while we have theories that are able to explain it, they are expensive in the computational sense to calculate, or difficult to do, or require approximations that make them, again, difficult to utilize. And being able to construct models based on data alone, and perhaps some degree of physical intuition, is sort of another avenue that can bridge the gap until we perhaps know how to construct the Newton's law of whatever we're dealing with in a more condensed fashion.
Are you talking about the kind of system that Caro was talking about a mass of atoms with an impinging particle, and trying to calculate how the energy transfers?
Yes, that could be the sort of thing. I mean, that is a physical system consisting of atoms, and we're interested in exploring what happens if we then shoot another atom at it. We could calculate all of this with the appropriate quantum mechanics and sort of drive the system according to quantum mechanics and see how it evolves. This is quite difficult, and it's certainly possible, depending on system size, but the math and the physics knowledge exists, but it's much more efficient to observe how this kind of system behaves and then construct a machine learning model that can reproduce that kind of behavior if you want to study this system. It saves resources in terms of computational time, and allows for sometimes even better studies, because the resources are better spent. You can study at longer time scales, you can study at larger system sizes with more atoms. You can have systems with 100,000 atoms at this point with a machine learning model, and it can describe the physics of how these particles interact, or how these atoms interact, well enough that you get results that match the expected physics.
When teaching this, do you come across resistance in any of the students, not wanting to adopt it?
No. I think students are excited, and I mean, certainly the students here are excited. That's why they are here. And if they're not, they're very good at hiding that they're not exciting. So no, I think they're excited. I mean, I think there should be a little bit of skepticism. I personally, if people say AI, I know this conference is called AI and Astrochemistry, but I really try to not use the word. I think it's a too hyped word, and perhaps categorically it's correct to call the field AI, but the part of it that works is to me machine learning. And if people say that they're really interested in AI, I sort of get skeptical myself. But if people say that they're really interested in machine learning and they start explaining whatever model they're working on, then I am interested.